Hello and welcome to the hearing. I'm John.
And from Chicago's North Side, I'm Scotto.
And before we get to this week's album, we have some listeners submitted on our last episode, our review of the Grateful Dead's American Beauty.
Nice.
On YouTube, Lawrence, I'm not going to try to pronounce the last name, I'll just spell it, GEUSZ4890, said, quote, Robert Hunter himself said, when asked about the meaning of certain lyrics, that was for each individual listener to find for themselves. This generation seems to need to be spoon-fed all kinds of meaning all the time. This generation will come back. And last but not least, regarding the comment that these songs should have been edited down to, quote, under 4 minutes, quote. Those are Lawrence's quotes. WTF is that because so many people nowadays have the attention spans of a houseplant. The Dead were never interested in writing short songs for radio airplay. They resisted Warner Brothers' demands to do so, unlike the Doors, who allowed Light My Fire to be cut down to around 3 minutes so that they could have a hit on the radio. That's actually true. Yeah, there is a much longer version of Light My Fire, or at least originally was much longer. Listen to some of the Dead's live material, widely available on YouTube, before you make wide-ranging statements about them based on a single album. And no, we didn't all have to use chemicals to appreciate the music. I've certainly heard more than one album. I'm going to bet you have too. Probably not as much as me, because
I
I
haven't
grew
sat
up
through
on...
an album, but I've heard, songs from other albums played.
And I said chemicals can help. I didn't say everybody needs chemicals to appreciate their music.
Oh, I think I said that too.
Okay. I actually responded on YouTube in the next comment, which I'll get to, so I don't want to take too much time responding to that one.
All right.
Lawrence also left another comment saying, too bad you two are too young to really get the Dead. Yes, it was all about the live experience. Sherry himself said they never made any good studio albums, which many of their fans highly disagree with. I also disagree with that. I loved American Beauty. I love its kind of sister album, Working Man's Dead. There's some great stuff. Also, when heads refer to the Wall of Sound, they are talking about the huge assembly of sound equipment created by Owsley that was only used for 1 year, 74 through 75. I was lucky enough to hear it at my first show, 7/29/74, Landover, MD. What's MD? Maryland.
Okay.
The sound was perfectly balanced and clear, especially in an indoor Coliseum type setting. You alluded to it, but then used the term to identify something like Phil Spector's production work.
Yeah, that's what I always associated the Wall of Sound with.
Oh, I'll get to my reply.
Yeah.
Also, listen to the Grateful Dead's music and to listen to the Grateful Dead's music and not get into Hunter's lyrics kinds of robs you of half the experience. Of course, they are mystical and non-specific. That's the point! Exclamation point. My reply, John here, because I'm replying as John Scotto.
Yeah.
Scott and I are 51 and 52 respectively.
Damn it, why'd you have to give our ages?
I've been pretty open about that. And I've said that you're a year and a half younger.
I will take any negative criticism being a man in his 30s, obviously.
So we're not, quote, too young to appreciate the Dead's music. We're just not big fans.
That's hilarious.
I'm a much bigger fan than you are, but still, I guess I wouldn't call myself a Deadhead. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of their work and their history. Also, I referred to the Wall of Sound PA system when I was introing the band, and then later in the episode, I referred to their production technique by that term. Yes, the term was popularized by Spector, but he certainly wasn't and isn't the only one who's used it. And I think it's an apt way to describe the Dead's dense recorded sound. I replied to it today and it was in no fucking mood. So, yeah.
But the length, when I was talking about the length, of course, if you've listened to this show, you will know I'm a huge prog head, and I do not mind songs going on a journey a long length. But I think what the Dead would have had so much more impact, to me at least, if it was short and sweet, if it got to the point and did it. I mean, the version of Light My Fire is a good example, actually. How much of that extended version is really that necessary?
Yeah.
Especially in a studio version. I understand if you're going to do that jam live.
Right.
But a studio version just doing that keyboard groove for like a solid, what, 3 minutes or whatever. It doesn't never made any sense.
And I'm not as much of a prog head anymore as you are, but I'm now much more into punk and alternative, so I do appreciate the shorter songs. So, like, I get it with the Dead. I get the extended music because not only for the live experience, but just because it kind of fits into the nature of what they do. It's about improvisation and, just seeing where it goes over time. But I
Could
agree,
you
some of them
imagine
would
like
be better shorter. I think most things would be better shorter.
I mean, it would be like on the level of like a Motown song,
Mm-hmm.
where it's
Yeah,
just like, holy shit,
yeah,
what was that? That was incredible because it just kind of speeds right by you and
mm-hmm.
you're just,
Yeah.
it just rocks you,
Mm-hmm.
And but if it stays around too long, could you imagine like a Motown song where like, and now we're gonna go on for a good 6 minutes and put some extra harmonies in here and
I'm
just
sure they probably exist.
a few additional solos, probably from the 70s. Yeah, when you
Mm,
get
yeah,
like
yeah.
that stuff. I'm thinking of 60s,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the original stuff.
Motown, where you're
Right.
just like, holy fuck.
And now on to this week's album, which is from 1991, Nevermind by Nirvana. I should mention this is episode 200 of the hearing, so we had to do something
Damn.
special. And
Yeah.
it's the 30th anniversary of Kurt Cobain's passing. We're Gen Xers. We're not contractually obligated to do this, but generationally obligated, I suppose.
It's ending my year of Seattle, really. I mean, I visited Seattle for the first time
Oh,
earlier in the year and,
hmm.
listened to a lot of Alice and Pearl Jam before going up. So yeah, this just makes sense.
And let's just call a spade a spade. The grunge umbrella was bullshit.
I was back and forth listening to this because, of course, I was, time to think,
Hmm.
In some ways you could kind of see how they could go together. In other ways, you're like, how the fuck did these two get in the same category?
And I'll get to my criticisms of Nirvana as we go, but this isn't to take anything away from any of them. But if you look at the big four of the grunge movement,
Yeah,
who are from Seattle, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and ASC, Alice
yeah.
in Chains, very distinct, different sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Nirvana, basically a punk band. Soundgarden, prog, effectively prog metal.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd say Alice and Soundgarden had the most in
yeah,
common because they both had the metal,
yeah, exactly.
pedigree.
Alice, more
Uh,
of a straightforward metal band, and
Alice had like a little bit country in them, kind of.
maybe. And as I've mentioned before, Pearl Jam, especially after the first album or two, basically folk rock.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of commonality in terms of their music. They were just all male rock bands around the same age who came out of the same city around the same time. So, of course, they had to get labeled together. And then you have Smashing Pumpkins from Chicago who somehow got labeled and got roped into it, even though they're nothing like that.
And he had Stone Temple Pilots,
Of
which
second wave. They don't
half
count.
of them from Jersey and like half
Yeah.
of them from California, I
Yeah.
think. I forget where Wyland's from.
Second wave. I don't really care. I don't really count that. And it's not getting into Mudhoney and all of the other lesser knowns. Anyway, Nirvana were an American rock band formed in Aberdeen, Washington in 1987, who are best known for being the face of grunge, as well as for the untimely passing of vocalist, guitarist, and primary songwriter Kurt Cobain, and for ultimately being the launching point for the Foo Fighters. They have a lot to answer for. Nevermind is the band's second studio album and the first to feature drummer Dave Grohl. It features a more polished, radio-friendly sound than its predecessor Bleach, and was the band's breakthrough, making them world famous and ultimately leading to the notoriously shy Cobain being seen as the voice of his generation. Nevermind was released on September 24th, 1991 on DGC Records, produced by Bitch Big and Nirvana, and features Kurt Cobain on vocals and guitars, Chris Novoselic on bass and vocals on the intro of Territorial Pissings, yes, that's him, and Dave Grohl drums, backing vocals on In Bloom, Drain You, and On a Plane, with additional musicians Chad Channing, cymbals on Polly, uncredited, he was their previous drummer before Grohl,
Okay.
and Kirk Canning, cello on Something in the Way. Reminder, I don't edit any songs into our reviews for copyright reasons, but on our blog at johnandscotto.wordpress.com, you'll find links to Nevermind on Spotify and YouTube, so you can follow along if you'd like. Track 1, Smells Like Teen Spirit. I don't think either of us are taking the real coward's way out. There's a few arguable coward's way out, but this is the big one.
That would be hilarious if we were like, it's this one, man. I mean, you know what? I'm kind of, I can't, I just can't, because I've heard it too many times.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of envious for a kid that didn't, wasn't around from the era.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, obviously, I'm far too young according to that other reviewer to remember. But no, I was there, and
I actually remember the first time I heard it, which is a surprising thing to say, given I'm admittedly not a big Nirvana fan. Driving around with my friend Rob, you know him as Grimace.
Grimace.
And it played on the radio, and we both loved it because, hair metal was kind of over. But, getting into fourth wave by that point and kind of useless. And here's this interesting injection of, like, loud rock. Incidentally, Jim Babjack from the Smithereens claims that Butch Vig told him that Kurt used him as a reference tone. Reference tone basically meaning Kurt said, I want my guitar on whatever song to sound like this.
You know what? I hadn't realized that the Smithereens were such a touchstone for them until, this review, because it's been so long, and I really, I remember the Smithereens from the 80s, but I don't think I had gotten into any of their albums until long after this.
Oh, I was a fan the minute I heard Blood and Roses in high school.
So, listening to this, I'm like, this fucking Smithereens. But I can't remember the first time I heard it because I was listening to alternative rock and metal and stuff, and stuff that wasn't not hair metal, but stuff that was, not as popular. So to me, it wasn't like, oh my God, this is like this big brand new thing. It was just, oh, that's kind of cool. I like what they're doing there, So
I was a hair metal kid in my teens, and then kind of in the late teens, early 20s was in kind of a classic rock phase. So this kind of blew my doors off. I didn't discover punk until college. You kind of got me into punk.
I'm trying to remember when I started getting it. It was probably around the same time, actually.
Okay. I think my first proper punk song that I ever heard was Holiday in Cambodia on that Hard Rocks disc at the radio station.
Played the fuck out of that. No, I was kind of into it. Probably a year or so before that, I'd say.
Okay.
In late high school.
Got to mention, I have yet to find any evidence that Butch Vig backs this claim up. It's just Babjack who says it, but I kind of buy it.
Yeah, I don't know if I get it out of Smells Like Teen Spirit. There are other songs on this album, though.
There's plenty of other guitar tones, and you just use it as a reference tone. Could have been for one part of one song. This is one of, I think, two songs that the entire band have writing credits on.
Which, I mean, that must have been like a huge sticking point, because this is the one that was the big single. Although,
and also it was the big single, and we've seen how good Grohl is at arena rock.
Yeah.
I had my criticisms of Foo Fighters as well, but the man knows how to write popular music. So I think he had a hand in that.
The drums are a huge part of this.
And I will admit, it has become a classic. I love that drum fill just before the distortion kicks in.
Although I can't imagine this being used in a commercial for anything,
I'm sure it has been.
It could be, I'm sure, but I just couldn't imagine it myself. But there's like I said, there has to be people younger than us that didn't hear this multiple times a day, every day, for like a few months at least.
It's got a great groove, especially in the chorus. Grohl, I mean, he's a damn good drummer. What he does in that chorus is really good. Love the bass tone. I've learned to appreciate Kurt's voice in recent years because I've watched a lot of vocal reactors, vocal coach and opera singers react to him, and they're all millennials, so they weren't there for it. So to them, Nirvana is kind of like Zeppelin is to us.
I like his voice in the studio, but I mean, I've never really heard him good live, really.
That's what Bryan Adams is for me.
Like that Unplugged, there's so many people that go on about it, but I never liked it. I think it like pretty much took the balls off of a lot of their stuff, and it just not the same for me. It's not what I came to Nirvana for.
Having said that, I've learned to appreciate his voice. His lyrics have never spoken to me and still don't.
Oh, the lyrics on this, and this, of course, are just incredibly stupid.
The whole album, it just, I I will say I don't get it. I'll give people that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just not for me. But and I think that was a big part of their mass appeal was something in the lyrics was speaking to hordes of other Gen Xers that just bounced off of us for some reason. I mean, for me, it was Neil Peart. If you want to talk lyrics, that really spoke to me.
But the other thing, the thing that really brings this song to life is the production. What Vig did
Butch Vig, one of the members
to,
of Garbage, who are basically a group based in production.
yeah, it just, and I've heard
We
other
should
artists
review them.
talk about it, how just it just explodes out of your speaker, you know? A completely different way here.
The production is brilliant. Got to give
hmm
Vig his due.
It comes at you from so many different directions.
On the album in general, but from a writing standpoint, it's good, but kind of derivative and really nothing special.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, it's the Pixies, It's just the Pixies with better production and better drummer.
Even back then, when I didn't love them in college, when all of our peers did, I didn't really know much about the Pixies. I'd heard Monkey Gone to Heaven and Here Comes Your Man. That's it. Didn't
Yeah.
Wasn't a Pixies fan. Their new album was brilliant, by the way. And
Oh.
also really didn't know Sonic Youth, which is the other obvious reference
Yeah.
here. The two they really borrow from. Even though I didn't know those two references, I still thought it was kind of derivative and okay. I mean, they were good. It sucks that Kurt is in this 27 Club because I wish he could have developed past all of that derivative songwriting.
Oh man, they took us on. We went on a little like tour in Seattle. I don't know if I mentioned this on the show already, but who knows? It was kind of like a Cosmos Kramer tour, but of Seattle. It
Uh-huh.
was this woman in a minivan, and luckily it was just Mrs. Scotto and I that booked it,
Mm.
so it was just the two of us and her driving around, and she took us to outside of his house.
Ooh.
I think he was like neighbors with the guy from REM on like
Uh-huh.
the other side,
Mm.
and the fans did like a shrine outside, just like this park bench that was near his front lawn,
Wow.
and she was like, "You wanted to like get a picture and everything?" I was like, you know, I was like, "No, I can't." I mean, it was just, and it kind of put me in more of his head, just like imagine the self-loathing
Mm.
of being in that situation where you're in this big rich house and stuff.
Hmm.
Like he only had it for like I don't know how many months before he killed himself, and just to work it all out.
He was infamously shy. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say he was probably neurodivergent. Many
Probably.
creatives are. There were some mental health issues at play, obviously. Certainly some drugs at play. And I mean, listen to Heart Shaped Box.
Yeah.
That was
I
not a happy
listened to
situation.
I listened
Um,
to a lot of his the lyrics when you do understand when the meeting cuts through, you're just like, oh,
yeah,
like I'd rather be dead than cool. I mean,
yeah.
just you, like you can interpret that one way, but
Well, Heart Shaped Box was about
interpret
his
it
marriage,
another. Yeah.
which was clearly not happy. Um, so I mean, it sucks what happened, but I kind of get it.
And I think
I wish
we're
there
only
had been some
harsh.
intervention, but I get it.
They tried. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, we're only harsh on this because it became Born to Be Wild
yeah,
and we built this city,
yeah. I when I'm being critical here, I don't mean to disparage Kurt. He was even or anybody in the band. I think Novoselic is a great bass player. Highly underrated. Um,
Because this song, if you weren't listening to this kind of music before, this is a really good intro.
oh yeah. Um, I will rag on Grohl because he is a sellout, but he's a fucking talented sellout.
Yeah, yeah.
Kurt was a damn good songwriter, and seems like a really good guy. He just I just wish he had had time to develop and find his own sound because I don't think he did in Nirvana. It's obvious who he was borrowing from, and everybody borrows. He just didn't have enough time to really to let it all marinate and kind of hide the influences.
That's exactly what I was left with after, the tour and everything. It's just like, what more could we have gotten from him
Yeah.
as this matured,
Mm-hmm.
I'd said maybe flippantly that he would have just been, Fred Durst, but,
Mm-hmm.
if he'd
No,
lived.
I
But
think
yeah,
I don't think even if he had survived, I don't think they would have done much more.
well, what would Cobain have done on his own? Like,
I think it would have been an Elliot. Well, I would want to say Elliott Smith in terms of well, let's not say Elliott Smith. Let's say Alex Chilton, who was in a big band, the Box Tops, and then went solo and had a very kind of low key but super influential solo career.
I don't know. I think he would have had a lot of attention on him, so I think he would have sold. But does he do another genre? Does he, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the other thing I didn't realize until reviewing this actually was he was very much influenced by REM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And, the fact that they were like neighbors too is
right.
kind of funny.
Yeah.
Um, and so maybe he would not have done the grunge
No,
or metal or punk approach and went for different genres.
depending on contracts, they might have done one more album,
Yeah.
and Foo Fighters would have still happened.
Well, I think he was working on Foo Fighters stuff at
Mm-hmm.
the time
Yeah.
because Cobain was in rehab for a while and then went missing.
Uh-huh.
Like it was kind of one of those, oh, you can go, come and go kind of thing.
Right.
And he just like took off. And I think it was, of all people, it was Duff McKagan
Uh-huh.
from Guns N'
Mm-hmm.
Roses that was on the airplane with him
Ah.
from LA to Seattle. And and Duff, I believe, has said that if it was done more recently, he would have had a cell phone on him and could have called
Right.
somebody.
Right.
But instead, they
Mm-hmm.
just said their goodbyes, and that was the last time you ever saw him.
Right. But I think Kurt would have deliberately turned away from grunge, done
I think so
something
too.
less marketable, kind of would have tried to back away from the spotlight considerably, and
Well, who knows what he
probably
would have
would have made
tried
some
to
amazing music. Um,
He could
yeah,
have tried electronic like everybody
yeah,
else was doing in the late 90s.
yeah. Also, if I went to Seattle, I would make a pilgrimage, but it wouldn't be to anything grunge related. It would be to Hendrix's grave.
I'm trying to remember. I don't. No, I didn't visit his grave. I just saw. Took some pictures of the statue downtown.
Anyway, on to track two, In Bloom. Really good opening riff. Love those drum fills. Really nice groove once it settles in. Nice bass tone. I think Kurtz generally sounds better in his upper register than his lower register.
It's very similar to Teen Spirit in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he liked to find those four chords and just kind of hang out on them.
Yeah.
Um,
The chorus intro, quiet bass verse, and
yeah.
then the big chorus.
Thank you, Black Francis. Great melody in the chorus, very sticky. Liked that chorused guitar that comes in midway through the verse. I mean, chorused in this case on the guitar is an effect. Makes it sound like more than one guitar. Nice harmonies in the chorus. Good tone during the solo, but the solo itself is kind of meandering.
Yeah. Oh, they did like to play with a bit of the noise rock, and I
Mhm.
kind of, to me, it's probably the most interesting part of the song because
Mhm.
a lot of this feels like we just heard it.
But we had
Although
better
that,
noise solos on other songs.
yeah.
Um,
Um, how many people ripped off this guitar riff though in the
yeah,
90s?
right.
Like 311, he just
Mhm.
pretty much took this riff
Right.
to, feels like a few songs that
Mhm.
maybe even their whole damn career. But yeah, this one was super overplayed as well, and a lot
Mhm.
of it was because everybody was sick of hearing Teen Spirit.
Right.
So it was just whatever song they could put out.
Mhm. Track 3, Come As You Are. This is my pick for favorite. So I am taking one of the Coward's Ways out,
Interesting.
but I've always loved this song. I've said before that Heart Shaped Box is the only Nirvana song I like. I was wrong. This is also on that list. There's the two. Um, Great riff. One of my favorites ever. I always thought it was bass, but it's actually guitar.
Okay.
Great vocal melody. I like that chorus guitar tone in the chorus. There's some great drum rolls in the chorus as well. Great fill leading into the bridge. Don't love the solo. It's kind of like a fly buzzing.
I think it was intentionally like a fly
Yeah,
buzzing.
probably.
Uh, I love that they're pretty much merging REM with the Pixies.
Yeah, yeah.
It's almost like a ballad in a very weird way. Uh, I think I think the track this should have been the intro song of the
Mm.
album. Kind of the "Come as You Are" kind of thing.
Yeah, I get it lyrically. It would have been a nice touch, but it's kind of a softer intro. Whereas, forget how many times you've heard Teen Spirit. Those opening chords are a really nice, like sort of fanfare.
Eh.
Um,
I think I think it would have been even more effective after a quiet song,
Possibly,
to
yeah.
come in with to come in after this
Hmm.
and you
Kind of
know
lull people in. Yeah, I get that.
and really it would have bookended the album very nicely where they're going,
True.
especially the end, how they end the first side
Mhm.
and how
Well,
they end the album.
you'll have to point that out because I don't have those notes from Wikipedia. Um, but it was at this point where I was kind of wondering if I'd been unfair to them because I really enjoyed the first three songs. Um, Track 4, Breed. Nice frenetic riff, great heavy bass tone, great sort of insistent groove, like the melody in the chorus.
I forgot this song was Nirvana. Um,
Oh
I had this confused for a few years with Stone Temple Pilots.
wow.
And think about it. This is a song. This is pretty much where they got sex type thing
Yeah,
from.
yeah, yeah,
And of course, Weiland liked to sound like other vocalists.
yeah. Love the noisy minimalist solo. They were really good, just not quite deserving of all of the fuss. And I think
Well,
we would have
they
appreciated
had a
them.
ridiculous amount of fuss. If this was
Yeah,
just a standard, regular album, it would be something everybody would be like, "Oh man, have you ever heard this
yeah.
before?"
It
kind of
would have
thing.
been good and of its time and honestly kind of forgettable.
If it was a hidden treasure sort of thing,
Hmm.
it would be very coveted.
Hmm.
But if it was something at the level of, oh my God, here's the same song for the 10 billionth time. This one wasn't overplayed that much.
No.
This one you'd only hear occasionally. And I'm trying to decide if I like that bass tuning, where it's almost sounds like a synth bass, but
See, I don't get the synth bass on this one. We'll get to the synth bass on, I think it's the hidden track, and I have an explanation for that. On this one, I think it's just a bit of distortion.
okay, well, yeah, that's what I think too. It kind of defeats the purpose of having a real bass if it sounds like a synth bass.
Well, yeah, on Breed, I think it's just some distortion on the bass, which I always love. The
It's
synth
like the
bass,
Patton Oswalt thing about dyeing Easter eggs, where you mix all the colors together
mhm.
and you make brown. What's the point?
Chris Novoselic actually has a bass that has a synthesizer built in, and he didn't do
Okay.
that. The company sold them that way. We'll get to
Huh.
that. So I
Okay.
think he just wanted to play with the toy. And it's on the hidden track. Speaking of songs that have been heard a billion times, track 5, Lithium.
Yeah.
Like the opening riff into the verse, great kind of clean tone on the guitar, nice groove, nice soft vocal in the verse. I think the yeah yeahs in the chorus are kind of memorable. They get stuck in your head, as is the bridge, especially the I'm not gonna crack part. Um, but it was at this point for me that they started sounding a bit formulaic.
Well, right. This song is very similar to Teen Spirit or In Bloom or even Come As You Are, It's that 60s mod sound, very much, Smithereens were
Hmm.
playing,
Right,
kind of closer to the Sonics because it's more louder and
right.
distorted. And of course, at this point, I'm like, how the fuck were they lumped together with Pearl Jam?
Yeah,
The two really didn't sound anything like, because, the Pearl Jam was going for more of a Creedence Clearwater Revival
right.
sort of thing, and Nirvana was going for a Sonics. The next track, though, my question gets answered, I think.
Hmm. On to that, track 6, Polly. an acoustic track at this point is way overdue.
Right, because you know, the one "Come as You Are" is kind of a ballad, but it's loud and
Yeah.
distorted, and so it's almost like a power ballad. But here we get a quiet
Yeah.
ballad.
That chord progression works really nice as a riff. Yeah, it's four chords again, but it sounds good.
It is pretty much the same chords as Lithium, though, isn't
Eh,
it? You're just playing it
probably.
acoustically.
Um, Great harmonies, nice soft vocal. I love how subtly the bass comes in verse two. You don't even notice it until you really listen. And it's a great bass tone that we finally hear in the last verse. And this is the one where Channing is credited as cymbals. He was, again, their
Okay.
previous drummer. I think this was probably recorded before Grohl was brought in
Right.
because all there
I did
are on
not
this
know.
songs is cymbals. There's no other drums.
I did not know they recorded it in Madison, Wisconsin. I'll have to
Huh.
check out that Vig. I wonder if Vig still has something up there.
Uh,
Um, of course the lyrics are creepy as fuck, and you know that's kind of where I think that's the kinship with Pearl Jam.
mm-hmm.
Because at the same time Pearl Jam was writing about an Oedipal serial killer. You know, they they were both kind of going for that same holy shit kind of feel. That things are not well.
What grunge did bring to popular music after hair metal was the darker side.
Yeah,
It did what metal did in its time, and acid rock really.
but not as showy.
Mhm.
I mean, there were the old metal guys, the hardcore
Well,
ones.
when I say metal, I mean Sabbath.
Yeah,
Sabbath came in, it was about the darkness, and not
yeah,
necessarily like a lot of it was uh, not just in lyrics, which were often fantasy based in Geezer's case, but musically, it was dark, it was heavy. Lyrically, a lot of grunge did focus on that darker side of things. And Pearl Jam Vetter has written some much darker lyrics. I mean, Alive.
yeah.
Alive gets If you really know what Alive is about, it is fucking dark.
Oedipal serial killer.
Oh yeah, okay. I
That's
forgot.
part.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
part of that cycle.
Right.
Alive is the serial killer as the young man,
Yeah.
and why he's there, and
Hmm.
then once is him on his spree, and then there's another song that
Right.
didn't make the album.
I forgot
It's about
about that
him
cycle.
on the way to the electric chair.
But there's it just Alive in and of itself. Outside of that is fucking dark.
And the fact that that was the pop song from that album
Hmm.
was the first single. Could you imagine if
Yeah.
they'd released Polly as their single on
I'm sure they
this?
have because I know I've heard it a bunch of times, and I
I don't
haven't
think,
really listened to this album many times.
uh, you know, radio stations played a lot of different things off it.
Hmm.
Uh, then again, I probably played it too
Maybe may have been at the radio station
back
in
in
at
the
college.
day. Might have been me
Yeah.
again. Um, but once you get past the shock value of the lyrics, there really isn't much here aside from the harmonies.
Right. Track 7, Territorial Pissings. Love Chris Novoselic, I did pronounce it correctly, singing a joke version of Get Together at the beginning.
This is my pick for strongest.
Okay, you surprised me on that one. I mean, I figured it
Finally,
was this or the hidden track.
finally unleashed and just fucking let it all out. No
Mm-hmm.
pop ambitions, just fucking do it. I
Yeah.
mean, hit you over the head.
There's some nice sound effects at the beginning, great heavy groove, good verse melody. Love the guitar tone. Kurt's scream in the chorus and especially at the end is amazing. And there's this
Right.
great glassy bass tone in the last verse.
Wish they had more of this. Right, the bass sounds like a real good bass, not
Mm-hmm.
as fuzzed out. But now the guitar is like fuzzed out and almost to an electronic
Mm-hmm.
sound, and man, do I like it a lot.
Hello,
So
Sonic Youth.
yeah, yeah.
Track 8, Drain You. Great heavy tone, nice sticky verse melody, good harmonies in the chorus, great drum fill into the second verse. I like that noisy, tense instrumental break. Um, Great tone on the short guitar solo. Um, Kurt was a much better guitarist than I ever gave him credit for. Yeah, I didn't understand it at that time because I was coming from a hair metal, classic rock, kind of leaning into prog background, and he wasn't the showy type that I was looking for. I didn't really understand him from a melodic standpoint.
I think it was a mutual friend of ours who gave him credit first and was like just how much he Rick,
Mm.
just about how he's pretty much inventing, like notes and shit.
Uh,
He was just and it'll kind of listen like, oh yeah, he's just I don't know if he actually knew how he did it, but
I think he did. He definitely knew
he
how to
had
play.
to
He
have,
might
yeah.
probably self-taught, didn't maybe know a ton of theory, but he knew what he was doing. Um, and there's just a lot of subtlety there and a lot of taste that, again, coming from a hair metal and prog area, I just was not ready to accept as great playing. And I'll admit he was highly underrated as a guitarist.
Now the track listing on this is comes off, for CD more than anything else.
Uh-huh.
But I always imagine this, and I think, my buddy had this on CD, so I borrowed his CD a lot. Um, that Polly would have been the end of the first side, and
Okay.
Territorial Pissings would have been the beginning of the second.
All right, that
But of
makes
course,
sense.
I could be wrong because I've never heard this on cassette or vinyl
And
before.
it's 12 tracks and a hidden, so that makes sense.
And the hidden wasn't on vinyl. The hidden was
And
only on CD.
right, and Polly's track 6, so that makes sense.
And so Drain You, to me, really, I think would have made a bit more sense on the first side
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like a lot of those first side songs kind of really blend together. They were too similar, and sometimes it's cool to have two similar songs, next to each other.
Sure.
But when you have like four out of the six, you break it up a little bit.
Yeah, they also kind of front loaded the singles as I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, and I think there could have been some stuff on the second side that might have even served a better single
Mm.
than the stuff they actually released.
Uh-huh.
But that's just my opinion. It's definitely different from the songs on the other side. They're definitely going for. I think they were almost going for a Pink Floyd feel in there,
Hmm.
which is really unexpected. Like that whole psychedelic breakdown in the middle, like with
Yeah.
the sound, the vocal recording kind of repeating,
Mm-hmm.
kind of reminds me a little bit of Dogs from Pink
Huh.
Floyd,
Yeah.
that whole stone,
Mm-hmm.
stone part. So it's like they took Dogs and squished it down into a 4 minute version with funk. So it's really interesting, and it's not the same old, okay, we're doing this mod 60s thing,
Yeah.
They're going for a more psychedelic, almost prog feel, but in 3.5 minutes.
Track 9, Lounge Act. Great bass line, great bass tone, good groove. I like the verse melody. I like those little jolts of heavy guitar before and after the chorus. Um, the chorus melody sounds a bit Police to me.
Yeah.
Um,
I totally did not remember this song. So when I went to listen to it, I was like, huh, this exists? I'm like looking to see if this was on the original. Like, how did I just skip this back in the day? Did it not like, I don't get it. How did I not ever hear this song before?
huh.
Or at least not remember it? It's kind of a more refined version of Territorial Pissings, isn't
Mhm.
it?
Yeah, yeah.
I like how it builds this could have been a Smithereens song, really. I could easily
Interesting.
hear the Smithereens just doing this one.
I'll have to take another listen with that in mind, but I love that scream in the last verse and chorus.
And it also sounds a lot like Grohl took this and used it on many Foo Fighters
Hmm.
songs.
Yeah. That's why I think he maybe had more of a hand in the songwriting than he's credited with.
That's true.
Because, as I
Uh,
mentioned in the intro, this one is much more polished and pop oriented than Bleach. And again, that's what Grohl does. He writes good pop songs,
Originally,
commercial
they were
pop songs.
they were all credited originally. It
Oh,
was all songs written and performed by
okay.
Nirvana, I believe. And then I think there was kind of a dispute of
Uh,
rights and stuff, and somebody
Something to CL.
somebody from the band Hole, I
Uh-huh.
think, was insisting that Kurt wrote everything, and so
Yeah.
there was a lot of back and forth. And
Uh-huh.
suddenly, it was Kurt, and just the few couple songs on the album were co-written.
Track 10, Stay Away. Great bass tone, great riff. Love that heavy guitar tone. Great groove. I like that call and response in the verse. where Kurt quickly sings a line, and then kind of on the other side of the headphones sings another line with a bit of guitar noise.
I was this many days old when I realized he was finally saying, "I don't know why," after
Is that it?
each
Okay.
line. I had to look it up. I was like, because I think something back in the day we were thinking it was Battle Axe or
Uh,
something. 'Cause he's like, "I don't know why."
really memorable scream in the chorus. And I love those little bits of lead bass in the breaks.
And really like this one. Just that difference between the versus the chorus.
Hmm.
I think they really execute that so well on this.
Yeah.
A lot more interested on the second side than I am on the first, actually.
Mhm.
But maybe it's because the first side was just
Oh,
so damn
played to
overplayed.
death. Yeah.
Yeah.
Track 11 on a plane, and that's Plain, which I've always liked. Like that opening kind of noise guitar, good groove. The vocal, for some reason, reminds me of Joey Ramone.
Yes. This one was pretty close. This would be my second favorite
Mm.
on the album. There's just, and this should have been a single instead of um, one of those other ones.
Yeah.
Instead of either In Bloom or probably, yeah, instead of In Bloom, this should have been the single, I think.
Uh,
Because there's so much more energy to it, you
yeah.
know? And it's refined with some great harmonies too at the same time.
Yeah. I love those
I
harmonies.
think
Great melody in the verses. I like the drum fills going into the bridge too.
it just ends with the vocal,
Mm.
which they knew they had something good there.
Oh, yeah. And track 12, Something in the Way. This was originally the closer on the album. Or it was the closer if you didn't know about the
It
hidden
was.
track. Um,
Yeah.
good closer. Again, overdue for an acoustic number. Nice soft vocal. I like the distant guitar tone in the verses.
Oh,
Um,
I love how just isolating this feels like
mm,
you are out in space on your own kind of thing.
and that doubled vocal when it gets into the chorus sounds huge. Nice dynamic shift there. The cello was a perfect touch.
Yeah.
And there's some really nice harmonies on the second chorus. And I just like the juxtaposition. The chorus is just the title, but
Yeah.
you almost kind of see the multiple ways it can be taken.
Yeah.
Like something in the way in the George Harrison sense, or something impeding you.
Right.
And it kind of
Something in the way of,
in the
or
way as
there's
in
something in the way.
blocking
Yeah.
you, or something in the way of, how someone does something. Um, it's just really, it's just a repeated phrase, but it plays with that double meaning beautifully.
Yeah. Especially just that isolation, that loneliness
Hmm.
that you could just hear. It's it's really why the appeal of Cobain, you know?
Hmm.
You could feel his pain.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
could you were right there with him. And he was really conveying it, and you were just as alone as he was when you're listening to this song with your headphones
Mhm.
on.
Rollins did that to me with I Know You, but he did that for all of us.
Yeah.
While most of our generation was going on about Cobain, we were quoting I Know You. Um,
Yeah.
doesn't work so well these days. I listened to it recently.
Oh, really? Yeah, I can't remember the last time I heard it. I think, you know what? I think I played it for somebody once, not that, long after it was big, and it just kind of went on for a little too long,
Mhm.
like where it's like the sun and stuff, and it
Yeah.
was just kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess sometimes, and it goes back to the Grateful Dead, you need to quit when you're ahead.
Mhm. And when you're, a full yourself 20 something, it's more effective. Um,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
and finally, the bonus track, Endless Nameless, or the hidden track.
Yeah.
Nice, noisy opening. Love the drum sound. Great scream in the verse. That double oh
This
007 guitar part in the chorus really caught me off guard.
this scared the fuck out of my buddy on his
Yeah.
first listen because after Something in the Way, that just ends with
Uh
like
huh.
12, 13 minutes of silence.
Uh huh.
And then
And
this
you're just
just
kind of
kicks.
sitting with the song.
So I think he like dozed off kind of like
Uh-huh.
because it's so
Oh,
lonely and
okay.
isolating. And in that silence, he kind of was nodding off. And then all of a sudden, this just starts blaring out of his speaker. I found myself fast forwarding through the silence or even Something in the Way to get to this though.
Uh-huh. And this is why I defend Kurt's playing, because he plays some slide guitar on this that is very cliche, but he nails the cliches.
Oh, it's so chaotic too, though. I mean, there's cliches in there, but it's kind of like the, come together, at
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of Territorial, where
Right.
they're just taking the cliche and turning it on its head.
But he's like deliberately quoting Page at points. And it's, he was a better player than anybody thought. Um, and that farty, I'm just going to describe it as farty bass
Party.
synth sound.
Yeah.
Novoselic had a Gibson RD, one of his many basses. The RD was originally sold with a built-in Moog synthesizer
Okay.
that you could run the bass through, and you had a bunch of knobs, and you could play with the sounds and get these kind of synthy sounds out of it. I'm guessing that's what he used on this track, and he just wanted to play with the synthesizer once. And if it was an original RD, which were fucking boat anchors, I mean, they were boat anchors once the synth parts were taken out to sell better, to take the price down. But I think it was an RD that infamously hit him in the head at the VMAs that time.
Oh my God.
So yeah,
Yeah. And this is just perfect noise rock. It
yeah,
reminds me a lot of old Pink Floyd again, like really old, like Careful with That
uh,
Axe,
yeah,
Eugene, kind of Pink Floyd, where they're just fucking the haunted house.
yeah. I love that noise break. I will say it goes on a bit too long.
Oh yeah. It's, but it's, hidden. So who,
Mhm.
they're
Yeah,
taking advantage of the CD and
right,
just,
right.
and it just goes into the way it ends is kind of weird. Didn't remember it ending this way originally, where it's just that mechanical kind of sound repeating. I'm not sure what it's from, if it's a feedback loop
Probably
or
just feedback.
yeah.
So, do you recommend it?
At first I was thinking this was going to be like the Grateful Dead, where
Mhm.
it was kind of like, oh, there's stuff to, but if you haven't heard this song a
Yeah.
million and one times, some of those hit singles,
Mhm.
yeah, you definitely have to check this out if you haven't before.
Yeah, I'm very much on the same page. If you're not familiar with this album, then if nothing else for the historical context, I definitely recommend it.
I
Um,
think I prefer In Utero still, though. I think it's a bit more thought out than this.
I listened to In Utero last night also because you had mentioned that,
Yeah,
and I've listened to Bleach very recently. Um, I actually think this was the best of the three.
really.
Maybe just because I do have a more of a sympathy for pop, but if you're familiar with it, yeah, well, if you're familiar with it, then the recommendation's not necessary. But
Right.
um, yeah, the album itself, honestly, like I said, I think it's kind of forgettable. But they were very, very important, of course. And if you want to hear what happened before the Foo Fighters,
I think there's like three or four songs that are a little on the redundant side,
mhm,
but for the most part, there's some really good shit in here
yeah.
to check out.
And that's it for Nevermind. Until next time, when we'll be reviewing Beelzebubba by the Dead Milkmen.
Oh, wait a
This will
minute.
be fun.
Were we going to do our tribute?
Hmm?
We got a tribute next week,
Oh, we're still
or
debating. We'll,
next time at least.
oh, yeah, we'll incorporate that in. Yeah, I guess next time we'll be doing a tribute to the late, great Quincy Jones with Michael Jackson's Off the
Yeah.
Wall. Then we'll get to Beelzebubba. Um, this is the one I want to make sure we got in this year because it's the 30th anniversary. So yeah,
Yeah.
we can adjust from going on. And I have the end of the year set in stone, so we'll plug that in when we get there. Anyway, until then, of course, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life, there
There
you
you
are.
are.